Hey everyone, it's episode 18 of the Experience.This.Travel show. Welcome, and I'm Lori Timoney with Virgin Experience Gifts.
I'm Christian Watts with Magpie Travel. Excited to be here today.
And I'm Bruce Rosard, one of the co-founders of Arrival.
Terrific. So why don't we have our guests today introduce themselves, and in addition to telling you kind of, where they're at now, they're going to talk just a little bit about their background, maybe just introduce where they've come from, and so forth, so you get a sense of a bit of their journey. So Susan, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Great to be here. So excited. So Susan DeBottis, I am currently the Chief Growth Officer for Rezdy. Rezdy is a reservation platform and distribution technology for specifically the tours and activities industry. I've been at Rezdy now for 2 years, almost 2 years. Yes, yeah, it's hard to believe. Time has flown. But prior to that, my most recent experience was actually at Marriott International. So I was at Marriott for 9 years and had a variety of different roles there. I went to school for hospitality, and so it was a natural fit for me working through some different management organizations, franchise companies, and hospitality before going into the Marriott corporate environment. And my experience there was largely focused on both digital marketing and distribution strategy. So it's translated really well into the experiences space, given the parallels that exist between hotels and experiences from a technology perspective. Before I left Marriott, I was responsible for leading Marriott's tours and activities division, which was a new and emerging business within the organization. That's how I got to know Rezdy, and was a partner of Rezdy's when I was there. And ultimately, my role at Rezdy is really focused in on our brand strategy, our marketing, and our partnerships.
Cool. Cady.
Thank you. Thanks for including me. It's nice to be here. Nice to see everybody. My name is Cady Wolf. I am the founder and CEO of A23 Advisors, which is a female-founded, funded, and led boutique advising firm that focuses in travel tech and hospitality. I am also the founder of Women in Travel Tech, which I started with a couple of colleagues in 2017. Prior to this, I've had a long career in travel and hospitality. I've worked on the e-commerce side at Travelocity. I've worked in wholesale ski travel with Bruce a while ago, before online travel was a thing. I've worked at tech companies like Switchfly and digital marketing and media companies such as Sojourns. So varied background, which has been great. Primarily focused in the commercial side, strategic partnerships, business development, sales, account management. And like you, Susan, I've also done my undergrad and graduate degrees in hospitality and tourism. So very passionate about the space, big advocate, and super excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So, we recently had an episode where we chatted about women in travel, and we discussed kind of the inequality within the travel industry, particularly around women in leadership roles. It seems like that divide is even bigger when it comes to women in travel tech. In fact, FocusWire, one of my go-tos for getting some information, apparently only 12.5% of companies in the travel tech space have women in leadership roles, which is really a significant number. And so obviously there is an even greater divide here, and something that, maybe we can dig into a bit. One of the things I want to start with is the definition of travel tech. So how do we define travel tech versus just travel? Like, what exactly is travel tech at this point? Cady, maybe you can jump in and start with that.
Sure. So I think the kind of basic definition of tech has something to do around a practical application of science. So my definition, my personal definition of tech is much broader and all-encompassing, especially in this space, because there's been such growth and evolution. To me, technology in the travel and hospitality space is anything that has to do with, again, kind of this application of science, whether it's data analytics, whether it's platform, whether it's technology, digital media. It could be a reservations engine, right? It could be digital advertising. So to me, it's less traditional hospitality, kind of working in F&B or at a front desk or something like that, and something that involves some sort of technical application that moves the business forward.
Okay, so that's, I mean, that's pretty broad, and it, when I think about travel, like, even just looking at like a travel agent, for instance, they're obviously using tech, they're using a reservation platform to make a booking. It seems like you're hard pressed to not be in travel tech these days, unless you're a tour guide, and even then, who knows what, you could be using some platform that's helping you do your job. Susan, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to the role that you have, right? I mean, if you look at travel broadly versus travel tech, I mean, you could argue that is it an operational role where you're, frontline servicing a customer versus actually the one that's building the technology or accountable for the technology. But, I think that tech enables so much of the customer experience today in travel that it's hard to really separate the two really cleanly. And so I would say it really comes down to the roles of the individuals and how they are using technology, or whether they're accountable to create the solutions or just use the solutions.
That's actually a really good point. Sorry,
Lori,
please go ahead.
I think this is a good starting point. First of all, you mentioned, a travel agent uses tech, a GDS. It doesn't mean they're in travel tech. They're a travel agent. If I'm a tour operator and a tour guide and I have some kind of tech that helps me run my tour, it does mean I'm in tech, right? It's someone who is, in my mind, works for a company that is involved in tech, i.e. Susan works for a reservation technology and channel management company. Cady has worked with a lot of companies that are tech companies. I don't think either of you are technologists, right? Like neither of you write code, right? So you're not in that kind of tech, but based on your roles, you work for travel tech companies. So in my mind, and I'd love to hear your all's opinion, that means you are women in tech because you're women working in tech companies, even though you're not technologists. But you're not just using the tech like a travel agent. So I would love to hear any opinions on that. And, just if that's what you're trying to do, Lori, is like, what is tech?
Yeah, no, I think it's important that we define travel tech, because I do think it's a pretty broad term, and I feel like it's used in different ways. And I think it's important maybe to the conversation just to identify that, maybe not spend too much time on it, but I want to hear from Christian first, because I think he probably has an opinion on this. What's travel tech, Christian?
I don't think it matters. I mean, you could argue this is definition of travel tech, and that, I'm based in San Francisco. Everyone's in technology. That's just what people do. Every company has tech now, right? So I think we could spend forever trying to define exactly who's a technology company and who's not. Susan definitely works for a technology company.
Right. So for purposes of this conversation, let's consider the fact that you're both working in roles and in companies where, it is a bit more. I mean, obviously, Susan, you're working for Rezdy. It's a technology platform. It's that rings true for me. Cady, you've been involved in the same thing. So let's talk a little bit about what your experiences have been moving from a more traditional travel space to travel tech. How was it different for you, specifically, obviously, as a woman? Did you find it more challenging? Susan, why don't we start with you? And maybe you could just talk a little bit about kind of your transition going from Marriott. Obviously, you were working with tours and activities, so you're working with their technology there at that point. But maybe you can chat a little bit about or discuss a little bit about your transition from kind of traditional travel to travel tech.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, my roles at Marriott are always pretty centered around the application of technology to do business more efficiently and effectively to support the end consumer's travel experience. And so I would say that, the biggest shift for me is not necessarily around, going from a travel company into a travel tech company. It's actually more going from a B2C business that primarily centers around B2C versus, B2B. And, my learnings in that have been, pretty tremendous. It's, the first time that I've shifted from B2C into B2B, and it's a reframing around who your customer is. And I think also just from a personal perspective, going from a very large corporation into a much smaller organization where you have the ability to get a lot more hands-on and, make a faster impact, make a direct impact, and you have more direct interaction with your target customer than you do, from a B2B perspective that's, servicing, millions and millions of customers. So that's been the biggest shift for me. It's less about sort of that idea of travel, because I was always working on the technical side of things and enabling through technology. But moving into that B2B space is now the change for me.
So not so much from the standpoint of, I went from sort of more traditional travel to travel tech. As a woman, I noticed this. That you didn't have that shift necessarily.
I really didn't. Marriott, I would say, was an exceptional environment for, promoting women, creating leadership opportunities for women, and Rezdy is the same. In my own personal experience, that I haven't experienced a shift as it relates to that. Not to say that is not absolutely a challenge that exists, but in my own experience, that hasn't been a factor.
Cady, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, thank you, Susan. Cady, we chatted the other day about kind of your experience moving into the travel tech space. And I'd love it if you could share a little bit of that. I think it was interesting to, to hear some of your stories around that.
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, I started in kind of wholesale ski tour operator. You're answering phones, obviously not a lot of high tech there. Moved to online travel with Travelocity. You could argue is our online travel agencies tech companies? Bruce and I have had this conversation. Is it really more in an e-commerce company? But for me, my real kind of like wow was when I moved from Travelocity to Switchfly. So much like Susan said, I went from a B2C business to a B2B business, or B2B2C business, which was really, Switchfly is a platform technology company that services the travel sector. And it's, kind of picking up someone's internal platform technology and replacing it. It's enterprise software. And that was a big jump for me, not only just from totally different language, but also being in a company that was product and engineering led first. They're kind of the big dogs of the company. There was a whole different, way that everything ran around product releases and, fixing bugs and just all of that whole language that I had to learn. And so that was a really steep learning curve for me. Also, it was a very male-dominated industry for me. So this was, 10 plus years ago. And I went from talking on the commercial side to, sales and marketing people who were rolling out the red carpet when I worked at Travelocity, to now at Switchfly talking to the head of product or the head of engineering, who, no offense to any product and engineering people who are listening, we're a little more dry. And the dinners were a little different than the dinners with the commercial people. So that was a big adjustment. Also, much longer sales cycle. Also, like the depth of the type of questions that were asked, just the technical questions, the things like that. But it was something, I challenged myself in my career. I knew I had to do that from a growth standpoint, but very, very different experience.
Is it bad that it's male dominated? Is that a problem?
It wasn't for me. I didn't mind it. I was fine with that. I'm just as comfortable in a room full of men as I am in a room full of women. So I felt confident that I could carry myself, but I could see certainly how some women could be intimidated. And again, when you looked at the product teams or the engineering teams that were predominantly male, I could see as a female coming into an organization like that, how that could be intimidating, which is, at Switchfly and at a couple companies that I've worked with, I started some women's organizations because I felt like there needed to be a little bit of a safe space or a collaborative space that women could work together and kind of bring themselves up. So for some people, I could see how that could be intimidating.
Katie, I imagine you don't
Can I
get
just do a follow-up on
intimidated.
that, Bruce?
I'm sorry, we're talking over people a little bit. I know you're not intimidated because anytime someone wants to talk to you, you could just say, come ski with me, and you'll just blow them down the mountain. So but it's a little different. I mean, I had a meeting with some switch fly guys at a Focusrite conference years ago, and it was all guys. I mean, everyone there, it was all guys. So really what I'm interested in, you came from Travelocity, you joined this very tech heavy company. What role were you in, and what was the development to grow in that role up? You know, I don't think you ever got into the C-suite, but what was your corporate growth like? Like, that's what I think we want to be talking about.
Yeah, so I left Travelocity with an 80-person remote team. I managed the North America business about, at that time, let's just say 800 million in revenue, a VP role. It was a lateral role to go to Switchfly, much smaller company. I had a team of 4 people. I grew it to 20, 20-ish million in revenue at that time, right? So very big disparity. I was on the executive team. I didn't have a C title, but I had a VP title, because again, you're a much smaller company. But yeah, it was different because you would come in. I had 10 years of Travelocity and a lot of confidence, and then I came into Switchfly, and I'm sitting at the the executive table with everybody, and I don't know the language. I don't have a lot to contribute early on, right? So I just had to be really humble. I had to be a great listener. I had to ask a lot of questions. I had to read a lot of industry news and industry press to educate myself. And yeah, it was a steep learning curve for sure. Did that answer the question?
I think what we're trying to get at is, I have no idea. I can't even really empathize. As a senior leader, like you both are, with the experience and skills that you both have, both in corporate, Marriott, Travelocity, big corporate, now looking at some smaller companies like a Rezdy, Switchfly, even Sojourn. What does that career path really look like? Have you felt like there has been a disadvantage of being a woman in either that corporate environment or in the more startup, small company environment? I think
it's an advantage for me personally. And Susan, I'll let you chime in, but I had to make that lateral move from Travelocity to Switchfly because I knew I was going into a space that I didn't know. I couldn't be unrealistic that I could move into the C-suite at a smaller company when I didn't know the space. So I just made a personal decision to make that lateral move to say, all right, I've got to gain this knowledge before I can then kind of go up from there. So that was my experience, but I actually think for women, there's a lot of advantages of being a female in tech. I think that there's actually demand if you know the space and are confident. Susan, I don't know your opinion.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think that I never felt a disadvantage. I don't feel a disadvantage today. I think again, it's just more about the shift from business models. And so, going from a large corporation, at a VP level into a C-suite in a smaller business, that was a big transition for me, just because, quite frankly, I never imagined at, the place that I'm at in my career, at the age that I am, that I would be in a C-suite as early as I was. And, for me to join Rezdy, I would never have applied to that job on my own. I'll say that. I never would have. And I was encouraged to do so, by the leadership team at Rezdy, because there was, confidence in me and an ability for them to help me develop and become an even stronger leader. And so, I think that I wouldn't have been a C-suite at Marriott, at this stage in life, of course, but having then that opportunity in a smaller business, it's been amazing for me. But there was confidence in me to do that, and I wouldn't have probably had that on my own. So I would say that is something that I think about in that transition. And I would also say that I think that, when you're in a smaller organization that, in general is maybe in an area that you haven't had that specific experience. So as we mentioned, we're neither of us are software engineers. you're not a developer, and so you have to definitely educate yourself and a bit more to hold a candle in the room, in conversations. But you're also at a level where you don't need to know how to code. As an executive, you're focused on strategy, you're focused on customer experience, and so as long as you have good people around you that are the experts in that, as long as you understand what's possible, and the good news is, I think with technology, anything is possible. You don't have to be, concerned necessarily if, you don't know how to code and you haven't had that in your background.
So I think this is really some great stuff that just came out of all of that. So interesting and fantastic that Rezdy encouraged you to apply for that job. Also interesting to note that you were not prepared to go after the job until you had that encouragement, right? So one of the things that we've learned certainly and seen through many different studies and conversation in general is that women do tend to kind of, they'll look at a job description, and where a man might go, hell yeah, I'll apply for that. I've got like half of the skills here. And then you have a woman who looks at it and says, oh no, I'm not going to do that because I don't have the skills. So, the idea that some women will say, I'm just not up to this, and a man potentially won't do that. So number one, interesting to note that is out there, but you can overcome that by having somebody encourage you to move forward, which you did. So kudos to Rezdy and kudos to you, Susan, for seeing that opportunity. And then the other thing that I loved in that piece as well is the discussion around, can you be a senior leader? Can you be in a senior leadership role in a tech space when you don't have a tech background? So, one of my questions today, as I was thinking about this, was what's it like to be in a leadership role in a tech company when you don't have a tech background? So what do you have to do to, kind of make it work for yourself? Now, you just mentioned a couple of things, and one being very important, educate, right? So educate yourself, make sure you're not showing up at the table without at least a decent amount of information. Any other comments or ideas around that? Cady, do you have anything to add in regards to, what you were experiencing in a leadership position in a tech company when you did not have a tech background?
Yeah, I mean, you also need to know, like, what's your USP, right? What are you bringing that's unique to the table? They don't want everybody who looks the same in a tech company. And so, also, to the point of, where Susan was saying about going for the job, everybody should take every interview and have every conversation. There's always something to learn. You're not going to get every job, but look at the job description and then add the things that you're great at that might not even be on the job description that can maybe outweigh some of the other things that are on there. I mean, everybody knows when you put a job description up, it's like your complete wish list. Everybody's not going to get everything on that, but yeah, I mean, I would say just going to a tech company, like obviously study the company, learn it, know the language, and then really come in with what your value is and what you would bring to that business to help grow it or differentiate it. And if you don't have a tech background, hey, be upfront with that, but show your willingness to learn and apply yourself and have hard work and a proven track record of being successful.
Christian, have you ever been in a position where you've had to hire somebody for a tech role, and you've had to consider man, woman? I don't know if that's something. I don't know, Bruce. Same thing with you. Have either of you been in a position where you've had to consider a man or a woman for a role that involves or is close to tech in some way?
Well, I think, Laurie, I've always had my own company, and I started off with a bus company, and there's certain roles, it's almost all men, like bus drivers, all men. We did everything we could, but every applicant is a man. I'd say the same for tech. We didn't have a huge tech team back then, but anyone in tech ended up being a man because you put an ad out and it was 99% men that applied. I think overall, as a company, we were very balanced. I didn't make a deliberate attempt to rebalance it elsewhere, but we ended up probably close to 50-50. But I think, you know, in San Francisco, there's the whole tech bro thing. And it's men that are attracted to tech companies as a whole, obviously. You know, you walk around Best Buy, it's a bunch of men looking at gadgets and stuff. And it's just a more of a, men love the technology in general. And so I've never had to sort of choose or balance, but you know, you go to the rival and you look at the tech companies, and it is the vast majority men. Most of the CEOs of the res techs are men, all Peak being maybe the only exception I can think of. Maybe there's some more, Bruce.
I was thinking, other than Peak and Redeem, they're not a res tech, but another tech player in our space with a woman CEO. You know, Arrival's not a tech company, so we're obviously very different. I think right now we have 12 full-time employees, with 9 being women. That wasn't intentional, it just worked that way. Like when we interview, we don't care. We want the best candidate. I think that's easy for a small company. I want to go back to Susan and Marriott. And you made the comment, I would never get to the C-suite at this age. Like, why not? Like I don't know how old you are, and I'm not going to ask you, but there's a lot of younger CEOs around the world, right? And why? Because I think this is really important in corporate more than small company. Small company, I'm not sure this is as much of an issue. But why did you, in Marriott, you had a hospitality degree, you've been working there for a number of years. Why did you think there wasn't a way to advance up into the C-suite?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question. It calls me out a little bit. I would say that my first response on that is I have felt more probably self-conscious over time around my age than I have ever been around my gender. And I think that, you know, feeling in a position where, you know, you're younger and maybe exasperated by the fact that you're, you know, a female, you definitely feel like you have to prove yourself. And so me giving that response is, you know, I never would have, you know, made it to that level at this stage is a reflection, honestly, of me feeling that I wouldn't have proven that I should be in that position. And not because I wasn't working hard, but I just, you know, didn't necessarily have years of experience. But, you know, in my experience at Marriott over 9 years, I was promoted multiple times. I was probably the youngest VP that was in the corporate environment. And so I didn't necessarily have any signals from Marriott that told me that I couldn't have done that. I think it's just actually more of a reflection of, you know, how I view myself and, you know, wanting to prove a bit more, to feel like I could have been, you know, at that level.
Interesting. So I want to go to something that Christian said a little while ago. He said, why, or no, I think what you said was, do we need women in tech? Like not in a bad way. You just asked the question, do we need women in tech? Like, is that a bad thing?
He said that. Really?
He said,
I don't think.
No,
is it a bad thing? Right? No, you said, is it a bad thing? That's what you said. Come on.
Repeat what I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I think Laurie's trying to
I got to defend my friend
Christian,
here.
what he was just, what I think what you were getting at, because we identified it as a male dominated space. And I think you were just asking the question, digging in, is it a bad thing or not?
Yeah. So, yeah. I think, do we need women? It's the kind of thing you if you were like a journalist, that would be your headline, right? Christian says, do we need women in tech? And it would be, but
no, well, we're not journalists. We're just having a conversation. And I'm just noting that was a question that you had. And I guess what I'm trying to do is divert this to say, let's talk about why it's a good thing to have women in tech, right? Why do we need women in travel? Why do we need women in travel tech? What are some of the reasons that we can put down right now that help people understand why it's important for companies to focus on adding women to their ranks of senior leadership roles in the travel tech space? Why we need to encourage girls to learn in school and get engaged in STEM classes so they can advance into tech careers, and that this can become a more diverse space. So I guess I'm trying to bring up that conversation of, why do we need women in travel tech? Why is that a good thing? So maybe you can start, Christian. Why do you think it would be good to have a more diverse space in the travel tech world?
Well, I answered this last time we did a show like this. I think diversity is good. Balanced teams are good. But I want to divert that a little bit. Does it need to be 50-50? And that's a question to maybe to the 3 or the 4 of you. And maybe we can come back and answer that. But, and again, I don't want to move into a whole different thing, but women are dominating, young women are dominating in every industry now, right? I think it's 70% of degrees now are women, 60% of entrants into universities, and 70% of degrees are by women, and I think they dominate every single subject now. But anyway, that's maybe as a topic for later. But I think it's fine that some sectors can be male dominated. I don't know the number. I think if we're pushing for 50-50, it's a mistake. Just like I don't think 50% of teachers need to be men, but I do think that there needs to be a balance. It shouldn't be 99% men. I don't know if there's a number there. I don't know if the number matters, but I think having diversity is just a good thing. It's different perspectives, different opinions. Just like any team, you want people good at different aspects, and that we all build teams made up of different people, because we all, as humans, we all think differently, and you wouldn't have a team of only only idea thinkers, only idea/marketing people. You wouldn't want a team of only coders, one, because it would be not interesting, like Cady said, but also you just need different inputs.
I think to bring that question to a different level, and where Christian got, is every company should have some level of diversity at the management, C-suite, board level to be more successful. Period. End of story. Research is done. I think we all know that, whether it's travel tech or anything, that by having multiple voices in the planning of the company and the strategizing of the company, you will be more successful, right? So I don't know that it's travel tech and women in travel tech. It's women in business is a good thing. And why hasn't it all flowed down to travel tech? There's a lot of reasons for that. But I kind of think that's a little, it's a bigger picture.
Yeah, yes, I do think that, for sure, travel tech is definitely feeling a divide that maybe other areas of the travel space don't have, or maybe other areas of business don't have. But I do want to hear from Cady. Cady, maybe you can talk just a little bit about women in travel tech. Why you talked about starting it because you wanted the networking, an opportunity, a safe place for women. But maybe you could talk a little bit about what you aim to do. So, what are you doing in your webinars and in your conferences? And, what is your position on diversity? Obviously, we can say that diversity is good. It is good. We all know that. But why? What do women bring to the table when they bring? I mean, there's a whole different way of thinking, right? There's certain characteristics or potentially tools that women use in a different way. So, what are some of the things that you would add to this?
Sure. There's a lot to unpack there. I got a lot of opinions on this topic. First of all, I believe in meritocracy, and I know on the last women's webinar, one of the women said that as well. Like, I think the person who is best suited for the job should do the job, but given the opportunity, if you're stacking up candidates and there's a diversity opportunity and that candidate can perform better, I'd love to see that candidate in the role. And that's just a diversity statement, not a female only or anything like that, but just kind of a diversity statement. I do a lot. I'm on a couple of university boards, and back to what Christian was saying about kind of like women in degrees and all of that. You're right, Christian. It's like 60% women enrollment and all of that, but only, I think it's like 18% of women are in STEM degrees, right? So how do we also make that more attractive and like less threatening to them? to kind of move them up through the ranks. But women in travel tech, I started as I was at a golf tournament where I was the token skirt at the golf tournament. It was all men. And they were having a great time, and they were golfing and smoking cigars and doing all this. And I thought, gosh, why aren't more women golfing? Which I've seen Kara Whitehill has recently put a post on LinkedIn about getting women golfing. And my father told, I'm one of 6 kids, he told us girls that we had to learn how to golf and play pool so that we were never left out of the room of men. Those were the 2 skills he was going to give us. So anyways, I started Women in Travel Tech basically as just an opportunity, like, why can't women get together also? And we have like a spa day, or we drink, wine and do whatever we want to do as an antithesis to the male golf tournament. And it's really just a boutique organization. It's mostly word of mouth. We're not trying to become some mega organization. A lot of it is referral based. Like, I like this, I like what you're doing. The content that we do, all women are in the travel industry, so we don't really need a lot of travel education. It's really more practical application, professional application. And we do webinars and our events really around women in investing, like becoming more comfortable with finances, developing your personal brand. What does executive recruiting look like? How to ask for more money. And we do this all in like an intimate, safe space. And it was really just built as a peer-to-peer network and an environment where some of the ladies in the industry can get together and say, like, hey, I'm hiring someone, or I'm interviewing for this job. Can I bounce a couple ideas off of you? And it's just grown organically. Like everybody in COVID, it hit a little bit of a speed bump and slowed down, but we're happy to announce we're doing our event in Park City again this year in December, and look forward to continuing to grow it. And I think it serves a good purpose. And just selfishly, this group of ladies loves to get together, and we have a great couple of days.
Sounds like fun. So we talked a little bit about, moving to the top. How do we, or the fact that, you've got to have encouragement and so forth to move through some of the challenging decisions. And I know, Cady, when you and I chatted, we talked a little bit about mentors and the idea that you've got to have your mentors. And I think that that's the case really with everybody, right? It's not just with a woman, it's with, it's really with everybody in terms of, is there one specific person or a company or, something that has really lifted you up. And so I'm wondering if you can give an example. Maybe we'll start with you, Susan, of a mentor or somebody that sort of led you along that path and rose you to want to take on these high level roles, and even just to go into travel tech. I mean, was it Rezdy? Was that the answer?
Yeah, well, I guess just starting with the role of a mentor, I think, not to get too sappy, but I think all the way back to my parents, right? And, and if I think about my dad and, his role in business, having his own organization, I mean, my dad, made me believe that I could do anything. And I think just as a foundation, that was a really strong place to start. I think in business, if I think about how I've been able to grow my career, it's primarily been a combination of working really hard and really believing in what I'm doing, but surrounding myself with people that, are advocates for me, that can help me grow, that can help me develop, and quite frankly, bring that confidence that, I may otherwise not have had on my own. And I think that that's been the primary role that any mentor in my life has played, is just, sort of that validation, that confidence that, you are enough, you get it, you're not missing something. And, and helping provide a path that way. It's interesting though, when I think about mentors, every single one, and I've never had any formal mentorship program, but every single person that I can think of and would put into that bucket has actually been a man, which is really interesting. Maybe there's something more to that. But I've found that in my experience that having men promote me and in my career, advocate for me has been the dominating factor, much more so than actually peers or women.
That's interesting. And Katie, what about you? Do you have a story in regard to a mentor or a group of mentors that might have really helped you along?
Yeah, well, I would agree with Susan. I mean, some of my best mentors have been men with daughters. No offense, I know Bruce has 2 sons, and I'm sure, Bruce, that you are a great mentor as well. But I find that some of these men that I've worked with who have daughters are a little more empathetic, because they've envisioned, like, if my daughter was coming up through this or this organization, or how would I want someone to help her or promote her. But I've had a lot of great female mentors along the way as well. I'm a big observer of just men and women, and really anyone in general. If you're sitting in a room, any meeting, any engagement, there's always something to learn and take away that either you can put in your toolkit or kind of level up and develop yours. My time at Travelocity produced a lot of great women in the travel industry that I've worked with. And on International Women's Day, on my post on LinkedIn, I probably put 30 women in there that I hashtagged that I admired. And I've actually had a lot of women that have been on my team who have mentored me that they didn't even know, that I've been like, wow, like, look at how amazing they're managing this project or doing this work or balancing their family or, running their team, that I've really, truly appreciated from, kind of downwards up. So lots of inspiration from lots of places.
But paying attention, it sounds like, because
Absolutely.
Yeah, paying attention. Christian, what about you? Do you have a mentor or somebody that's kind of helped you along?
No, I was asked recently what sort of, what would you do differently when you were a certain age? And I say now I would have had mentors when I was younger. But I guess a typical guy, like, overconfident, and I can do anything and it doesn't matter. So you end up just kind of doing it on your own without stopping to think, I don't know what I don't know. It wasn't a problem. I was perfectly happy, but made a lot of mistakes that I shouldn't have done. But never stopped to think. And I don't think mentors were so big when I started 20 years ago. It wasn't such a well understood sort of thing people did.
Yeah. How about you, Bruce?
No question, my father was my first mentor. Just in a lot of ways. He, just one really quick example, he retired. He was an engineer that retired in the early 90s, and it was 1994. And I said, Dad, go find out what this whole internet thing's all about and how I can use it for my ski business at the time. And within 6 months, he had written a website for us. It was in black and white. That's how early it was. Told me I needed to get on Eudora, which was the first email client. Told me about www, and at that level. My other real business mentor was Philip Wolf, founder, CEO of Focusrite, the late great Philip Wolf, and I learned so much from him. And it really took me from being, I started my business like Christian did right out of university, didn't have a clue what I was doing, and it wasn't until I started working with Philip and Focusrite that I started to get it. 20 plus years later, it took a little time. And a lot of the lessons learned from that, I use every day.
That's great. Well, I think probably my mentor was, I've had a lot of role models, of course, my mom being one of them, but I worked with a woman, one of my first jobs with Saga Holidays, dating myself way back then. She was the VP of product and product not from a tech side, but from a go out and contract hotels and rate, in buses and air and everything else. She was amazing. And she just went on to hold a number of different high-level roles in different tour operators and travel companies. And I sort of followed her around. So I was lucky to work with her, but amazing how it's interesting, Christian, like what you said, you don't know what you don't know. And I think also when you're younger, you think you don't always need help, but then as you get older, you realize actually I kind of do. And how what you gain from actually listening is amazing. So I think
Lori, I
you know,
do have one quick mentor story that I think is a good lesson for everyone, if I can share.
go right ahead.
I had a boss at Travelocity, Paul Nelson. He's famous in the industry for people who've been around a while and know him. And I had a very large hotel partner in Las Vegas who was spending 6 to 7 figures with us. I was on the advertising sales team. But the partner was very bullying and like mean to me and very condescending. And Paul called them up and told them, we're going to cancel our contract with you. We don't want your money if this is the way that you treat people. And the guy who was a senior executive at this very large hotel company in Las Vegas had to personally give me an apology. And that was a lesson for the rest of my life. That was about like having your employees back and believing in them. And it was the best. It was awesome.
That's cool. That's really cool. Well, I decided a while back, I think I probably was, maybe, I don't know, 10 years into my career when I decided I'm not working with people I don't like anymore. And that not from the standpoint of employees at a company, but from when I had the choice to decide who I wanted to do business with, I was not going to do business with people that I did not respect and like, and that, I probably didn't have to. There's just too many other opportunities out there to do it. So it's kind of like that, actually. Bruce, I think you maybe wanted to ask one last question. We'll give you the floor, and then I think we probably have to wrap after that.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to Lori, Susan, Cady. One question, one sentence that you can give us that can be our ending statement from this session. What's the number one piece of advice to any woman out there listening who wants to advance from where they are today, manager, director level, up to an executive position? What would be your one piece of advice? Susan, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think I would say finding the right business that supports diversity and development, and finding the right advocates and mentors.
Great. Cady?
I would say be adaptable, know your value, and ask a lot of questions, but back those up with some ideas for solutions.
Excellent. And Lori?
Yeah, I really do agree here with Susan. I think you've got to find the right company. You've got to find a company that supports women. And what's going to happen is you're going to be surrounded by incredibly intelligent women. You're going to learn a lot. So pay attention, listen, and don't be afraid to ask for what you deserve.
Okay. You want to wrap it up, Lori?
All right. Yeah, I think we've covered quite a bit here. I'm not sure if we solved all the problems of the world, especially as it relates to women in travel tech, but we've tried. Anyway, thanks so much, Susan and Cady, for joining us today. This was a really good conversation, and one we probably need to continue at another time. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.